Hey everybody, this is One More Thing, and I am Jesse Dollemore. This is so new that I don't really have a non-awkward way of starting the show, so we'll start there. Hey, last time on the show, I solicited for questions when I talked about impeachment after the announcement, and I am blown away. There was so many questions submitted, a bunch of voicemails, so many voicemails, in fact, I'm going to have to get a different number because the number I gave that we'll continue to use until I do change it. But the number I gave is specifically for my podcast, I Doubt It with Dollemore, which little self-promotion is twice weekly. It's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you find podcasts. It's not the YouTube channel. It's something completely different with my lovely, talented, and scholarly co-host, Brittany Page. So, anyway, I'm going to have to change the number because we just got inundated and it was awesome. So thank you so much for the response. I also got some video questions. Let's just get started. We'll just jump right into this and address some of the questions. Let's start with the video question.
Hey, Dollemore, I was wondering, when the House sends it over to the Senate, does Moscow Mitch get to make any determinations, or is it John Roberts, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, that gets to do that? That's my question. All right, have a nice day.
Well, thank you, Martin. I appreciate the question. That was sent, by the way, through Twitter. It was a Twitter DM. Yeah, my DMs are open, which, it's a mixed bag. I get a lot of hate, a lot of death threats, but there's also the support and the love, too, so I appreciate that. So when the House sends over the articles of impeachment, let's operate under the assumption that there will be articles of impeachment voted on and passed and sent to the Senate. There is some question here. One, let's just out of hand, we can dismiss that Chief Justice Roberts having anything to do other than presiding over the trial. But does Mitch McConnell get to make any determinations? There is question around that because this Senate, particularly with Mitch McConnell at the helm, is notorious for flouting their own Senate rules. Now, I looked into what the Senate rules are, and it would be an aberration for Mitch McConnell to try to disallow the trial, the impeachment trial, to be held. Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution gives the House of Representatives the sole power of impeachment, which again isn't removal, it's just the bringing of charges against a high office holder, in this case, the president. Article 1, Section 3 gives the Senate the sole power to try all impeachments. So there is... Also, let me say this. I don't want to get too off track, but the impeachment process, there are not very hard, fast, very outlined rules for this because although they did plan for it, our founding fathers, they did plan for it, so it's obviously in the Constitution, but the exact mechanisms by which aren't to the letter. Because, we didn't expect to have a monster like Donald Trump, a disease like Donald Trump in office. So we have to work around the framework of, we're going to have to figure this stuff out. But relative to the exact language, this is what the Senate rules say. Whensoever the Senate shall receive notice from the House of Representatives that managers are appointed on their part to conduct an impeachment against any person and are directed to carry articles of impeachment to the Senate, and here's the part, the Secretary of the Senate shall immediately inform the House of Representatives that the Senate is ready to receive the managers for the purpose of exhibiting such articles of impeachment. When the managers of an impeachment shall be introduced at the bar of the Senate and shall signify that they are ready to exhibit articles of impeachment against any person, the presiding officer of the Senate shall direct the sergeant-at-arms to make proclamation, who shall, after making proclamation, repeat the words, "All persons are commanded to keep silence on pain of imprisonment while the House of Representatives is exhibiting to the Senate of the United States articles of impeachment against blank blank. We'll just insert Donald Trump there. It's a lot of shalls. There's a lot of wills. There's not a lot of mays. And what I mean by that is in law and when you're writing rules of procedure, if it's something that's up to your discretion, you would write may. The Senate Majority Leader or the presiding officer may do this. But when you write shall, that means you shall do it. You will do it. Those are commands. They're not, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. The wiggle room comes in with Article 1, Section 3, which is the Senate has the sole power to try all impeachments. And I think that's, if this is going to be attempted, not tried, that will be where Mitch McConnell goes. It's not great. So thank you for the question, Martin. I appreciate it. We have next a voicemail question. Let's get to that.
This is for the YouTube. One more thing with Jesse Dollemore. It's Chris Bresney. I was calling because I was wondering, do you think that if it actually got to the point of full impeachment, Donald Trump would have the grace to actually step down, or would we actually go through with it? Just curious. Love the show.
Well, thank you, Chris. This is, again, kind of a judgment call. Do I think Donald Trump would have the grace to step down? And no, I don't think Donald Trump has the grace. But I've been accused of being an optimist many times in my life, and I do have an optimistic viewpoint of, it may be a bumpy road getting to justice, and it may be a circuitous route to get there, but we're eventually going to straighten this out. We're eventually going to get to the truth, and the right will win out. And I don't mean the right or the left. I mean the correct way. We're going to get through this. So even if he decided not to step down, I think that the institutions in place would not allow him to stick around. Thanks, Chris, for the question. Next question is from Richard Wood. It would be good to understand the whole process. What part would the Supreme Court play, e.g. Trump's appointees? If it passes the House, can Mitch McConnell block it from the Senate? If it goes to the Senate and it passes, what next? Can the Supreme Court overturn the Senate and the House? What if Trump refuses to go? I agree with AOC that if it makes it to the Senate, there should be a public record of every vote. Does that happen? So let's address these one by one. The Supreme Court doesn't play any role other than the fact that when the president is the person being impeached, this doesn't apply for the vice president or federal judges. That's actually an interesting thing. The Constitution outlines that if any federal officer that's being impeached, normally the vice president presides over the trial. In the case of a president being impeached and tried in the Senate, it is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who presides, the presiding officer. It's really more of a ceremonial role, kind of just controlling the process. However, the Constitution doesn't say when the vice president is impeached. It hasn't happened yet, but who presides over that? That's unknown. It's like, again, one of those things that all of the details weren't really lined out by the founding fathers when all of this was figured out. But to answer the question, there is no role that the Supreme Court plays. So if the House decides to impeach, they have that's their sole domain, the sole power to impeach. Then they send it to the Senate, which has the sole power to try, find guilty or not guilty. The Supreme Court doesn't have a role. There is no appeal process like there is in criminal court. If the House passes, how can Mitch McConnell block it from the Senate? We've already kind of talked about that. If it goes to the Senate and it passes, what next? And can the Supreme Court overturn the Senate and House? No, Supreme Court cannot. If it goes to the Senate, if it goes to the Senate, what next? There's a trial, and it has to pass by 2/3 vote. They're the jury. The members of the Senate are the jury. The Constitution does say that they must be sworn. So it's not just like showing up to work and casting a vote on legislation. They're actually sworn in like a jury would be. What if Trump refuses to go? I believe that the mechanisms surrounding our processes would force him out. He wouldn't just get to go home and go up to the residence of the White House and remain there. And then as far as agreeing with AOC, I'm not familiar with what she said. I'll take your word for it that there should be a public record of every vote. And there is. When Clinton was impeached, I actually was there working for the Senate at the time and got to sit in a couple days of the impeachment proceedings. I wasn't there for the vote on the floor, but it is a public vote. It's not a secret ballot. They call the roll just like they do with legislation, and each an individual senator has to vote up or down. It's not a secret like a jury trial where you don't know how it went when they deliberated. So thank you, Richard. Appreciate the question. Next from Lola. Someone told me that if Trump started a war, he'll remain in office even if he's impeached. Whoever told you that is wrong. It doesn't matter what the situation is in the nation or internationally or relative to war. If Donald Trump is impeached and removed, and I'm assuming what you mean by that is impeachment meaning removal, he'll be gone. And we have a succession plan in place. If he's removed, Mike Pence is in office. If he's removed and Mike Pence is not available, like let's say he is removed or he isn't alive or whatever, the next person, the Speaker of the House, would take over. So there's a line of succession that we have been smart enough to put in place in the event that we lose a president. Just because a war is happening doesn't mean that Donald Trump is any more or less subject to the processes of our government. So thank you, Lola. Can McConnell, from Bobby Mangiano, can McConnell block a vote to get to the Senate floor? I think we've already talked about that a little bit. There is a possibility that he may try to do that. And look, who would put it past Mitch McConnell up to this point? I mean, he robbed a Senate confirmation, even the opportunity to confirm Merrick Garland in a brazen and nakedly corrupt attempt, a successful attempt. So I wouldn't put anything past him. He is a POS, as they say. Some great questions, by the way. These are aspects that I think people not looking at this procedure as closely would just overlook. I think these are fantastic questions. Is it possible, again from Bobby Mangiano, is it possible that he could be impeached in the House, not in the Senate, and still get reelected? Oh, this is from J.D. Parrish. Then what would happen? Yes. Yes, that is a possibility. If he is impeached by the House, they hold the trial in the Senate, and he is found not guilty and allowed to remain, it's like being found not guilty in a trial. The charges against you were dropped, you're let out of jail, you're innocent. Same kind of a thing. He absolutely could. And then Bobby Mangiano, as kind of furthering that, can an impeached president, and I assume when you say impeached, you mean impeached and removed, can an impeached and removed president run for office for a second term? It's kind of iffy. We don't know. I do know that under the Constitution, a second vote has to take place by the Senate, which disallows or allows the impeached individual, impeached and removed from office individual, to run for federal office. So, for instance, there was a federal judge named Alcee Hastings who was impeached and removed from office by the Senate, and the Senate didn't choose to vote to disallow him to run for future federal office. What he did, he ran for Congress eventually, won, and ended up being in a position to vote against the impeachment of Bill Clinton. So yeah, if the Senate votes, if they remove Donald Trump, they will need to vote to disallow him to run for office again. Now, it is kind of an odd thing in the language of it, though, because if you're removed from that office, could Donald Trump run again? Would it be considered a separate office? Another election, like getting reelected to something? Or are you disqualified from being the president ever again because you were impeached? These are questions that would have to be brought up by, I guess, the Supreme Court or litigated through the courts and then find a final decision having been made by the Supreme Court. Some of this is really in the weeds. Some of this also isn't really going to apply because Donald Trump is old and, it's not going to be a ton of time left for the guy. He's not going to be at 99 years old trying to come back and be president. At least you would hope not. Next question. Tommy Boyd, my question is, what happens after Donald Trump is impeached? What happens to him? Again, impeachment, I'm assuming you mean impeachment and removal. He will just go back to regular life. And the way our system is working right now, because of the Office of Legal Counsel's decision, their legal memo on impeaching or indicting a sitting president, right now, as it stands, especially with this Justice Department, a sitting president cannot be indicted or charged with a crime. So once Donald Trump is out of office through impeachment and removal, he can go and face his crimes in court. He could be indicted. He could be brought up on charges. All of the different federal grand juries that have, or the 2 federal grand juries that Mueller had impaneled, all of that could be used as evidence in a future trial against Donald Trump. And then finally, Alex, my biggest question is, how does double jeopardy work with impeachment? If Trump gets free because of the extremely partisan jury that is the Senate, will this prevent prosecution if he is out of office? No, it will not. I kind of tried to group these questions together. Impeachment is a political process. It is not criminal. Double jeopardy does not apply because he was not tried for literal, technical, judicial crimes. The term high crime and misdemeanor doesn't mean actual misdemeanors and actual physical crimes. So if he is removed from office, that is actually the process by which you get him out, and then you're supposed to take care of him through the criminal process. It's not perfect, but again, when our country was coming about and being devised in this grand experiment that has lasted, almost 250 years, you don't expect for a president, a leader of the country, to be such a despicable human being. You don't expect them to work for their own self-interest. You expect them to be noble. Look, we've had a lot of pieces of shit as president. Slave owners, Richard Nixon types who do work for their own self-interest and for their own reelection. But Donald Trump is singularly unique in his vast international business interests, in his properties where he's steering government contracts, where he's having military stays, where millions and millions of dollars are being spent at his properties by political allies and people trying to curry favor with him. It's different. We've had wealthy people run for office and be in office before, most certainly. But none have displayed the rejection of good of country before their own good, quite like Donald Trump has. Anyway, those were awesome questions. I think this might end up being a regular Friday thing. That would be spectacular. So if you want to do that, we're going to continue to use the phone number for the podcast, 657-464-7609. What you can also do is record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to idoubitit@dollemore.com. Maybe I'll have to come up with a new email address too. But for now, just use that. You can also DM me like Martin did, a little short video of yourself. DMs are open. You can also send little videos to the email address. Again, idoubitit@dollemore.com. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. If you appreciate what I do here and you want to become a channel member, click the join button. That would be fantastic. I've talked about it before. If I'm able to marshal the size of my audience and 1 or 2% of my audience joins, I will be completely unencumbered by YouTube's rules and their restrictive policies about monetization, and I will be able to grow the operation. I'm now in a home studio, which works great, do the podcast out of here, do the other videos that I do out of here, do this out of here. But I want to expand the operation where I can actually have a production staff. I am a 1- and 2-man show with my co-host on the podcast, and that's it. I don't have a staff. So it would be nice to be able to grow, to be able to serve you better, serve the truth better, and move the conversation forward. So thanks a lot. I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.